watching the Mystical Green Beanie.
Hey, what's going on, dudes and dudettes? I am the Mystical Green Beanie, and today I wanted to talk about the first issue of Spider-Man Life Story by Chip Zdarsky, Mark Bagley, John Dell, and Frank D'Armata. And this first issue was really strong. So, for those of you who might not be aware, Spider-Man Life Story is a miniseries that's going to chronicle the adventures of Spider-Man in real time. So, we're going to see Peter Parker age from the 60s up until modern day, and from what I understand based off this first issue, we're going to see Peter deal with a lot of real-world issues and events that each decade is known for, kind of like Superman, Batman Generations, but within the Marvel Universe, which I think is really cool. So this issue takes place in 1966, and it's all about the Vietnam War, and how Peter's dealing with being a student, as well as being Spider-Man during the early days of the war. And something that I thought was really interesting was how this is a Peter Parker who's been Spider-Man for 4 years. You know, he lives by the power responsibility ideology, and he's somewhat troubled because he doesn't know how to interpret that life motto with what's going on politically, and if he himself should use his powers to help in the war effort. And this is a question that the government is also asking, because this is an established Marvel Universe with Captain America and Iron Man and maybe the Fantastic Four? And normal people are asking the question, if these people are so powerful, why aren't they being immediately drafted? And there's also a great moment with Captain America and Cap and Peter are talking about what it means to be responsible and how responsibility comes from the decisions that you believe are the right thing to do with the gifts that you're given. And I like how that informs the backup story for this issue, where Captain America himself goes to Vietnam, and after he witnesses what's going on overseas, he betrays the American government and starts protecting the Vietnamese people because he doesn't approve of what's happening under the banner of the American flag. Which I really liked, because that calls back to Steve's core ideology where he respects the American dream and what the flag stands for, while simultaneously believing that you don't have to stay slave to the American government to respect the principles of which America was founded. And that also puts he and Iron Man, who was in full support of the war, in opposition, sowing the seeds for an alternate universe version of Civil War, which was incited because of the Vietnam War. Which is really cool, because that could actually lead to a comic book version of Civil War that might not suck. But back to Spider-Man, which this book is about, Peter has the war in his mind, but it's not the main thing he's worried about. Zdarsky's Peter Parker is very traditional, in the sense that Peter's insanely neurotic because he's constantly juggling too many balls at once, and while he means well, he can't do everything. And sometimes he ends up letting down the people he cares the most about. Hell, sometimes doing the right thing results in hurting the people he cares the most about, which is exactly what happens to Harry when Peter tells the police about Norman Osborn being the Green Goblin. And what makes this sort of interesting is that this is exactly what Peter didn't do in the main universe. Because if memory serves, Peter and Norman fight, and Norman loses his memories, and Peter just lets everything slide, hoping for the best. And that's an interesting change. And if Zdarsky does end up doing a Death of Gwen Stacy type thing with this story arc, or much of other miniseries, I'll be interested in seeing how that plays out, if that even plays out. Because this issue ends with Peter running to the train station to see Flash Thompson off to the war after he enlists, but, Spider-Man stuff happened, and he got there late, even though he tried his best. But while he's rushing, he forgets to button his shirt up all the way, and Gwen finds out that he's Spider-Man. Which brings into question how she might feel about Peter now that she knows that he's Spider-Man and has superpowers, but refuses to use them to fight in the war, yet Flash, who's an ordinary human being, is willing to go to war. What I'm trying to say is that there's a lot going on here, and my brain really liked thinking about it. Oh, and one last thing before I move on, because I feel like I can talk about this issue all day, but
ain't nobody got time for that.
But I just wanted to talk about how I feel like Chip Zdarsky gets Peter Parker. Like, I love Nick Spencer's run that's going on currently, and I love the PS4 video game, and I love Into the Spider-Verse, but I really do feel like out of all the creators working on Spider-Man across all media right now, Chip Zdarsky understands the character of Peter Parker the most out of everybody, and he gets the world of Spider-Man the most out of everybody, because Zdarsky writes Peter to be kind of a dick who's smarter than everybody else in the room, and he also knows it, but he's not a bad guy. He's just a person with flaws and insecurities, and sometimes they get the better of him. But he also writes Peter in a way where he recognizes that character flaw in himself, and he takes responsibility for his actions. And so far, between this and his run on The Spectacular Spider-Man, the stories he's written aren't relentlessly dark, but they're not too overwhelmingly silly either. You know, there's a sweet spot that I think Spider-Man stories should occupy, and Zdarsky, he gets it. Then there's the art by Mark Bagley.
Oh my God!
Now look, I have a strong bias here because I am a huge Ultimate Spider-Man fan. That was the first comic book series that I followed. I guess my mouth and words aren't cooperating today. But yeah, that was the first comic book series that I followed religiously. And I'd forgotten how much I missed seeing Mark Bagley draw Spider-Man. It feels right. Although, it was kind of weird seeing him draw the traditional versions of these characters and not their Ultimate Universe counterparts, because I'm just not used to seeing him draw a version of the Green Goblin that doesn't look like the Incredible Hulk with psoriasis, or a version of Gwen Stacy who doesn't look like she listens to Chevelle. But I really liked his art in this as far as nostalgia goes, and I also like how he doesn't go overboard with some of the late 60s imagery, because the book certainly feels that way already, and I never feel like I'm looking at a sitcom parody version of the 60s. You know, it feels like an authentic version of that decade, which, yeah, I know, because I was totally there for it. But yeah, Bagley feels like he hasn't skipped a beat since Ultimate Spider-Man, and he's just on point. Although I will say the inker John Dell and the colorist Frank D'Armata were noticeably different than the other inkers and colorists that he's worked with in the past on Ultimate Spider-Man. And the final product just, it looks strange to me. Either that or Bagley's art style has changed, but his work just looks different now. And that's maybe an intentional choice, because Ultimate Spider-Man does have a very heightened, somewhat futuristic visual style, and this story takes place in the 60s. So, yeah, that was probably a creative choice made by them. Or maybe it was a happy accident like most kids born during the Vietnam War. Who knows? Anyways, guys, I love this issue. And if you haven't already, seriously, just pick this up. This feels like it could potentially be a modern classic, and I feel like it would be a real shame for anyone to miss out on this. But those are just my thoughts. But what about you? Did you like this issue? Did you not like this issue? Have you read it? What are your thoughts on the general concept of this miniseries? Let me know down below in the comment section. And if you like this video, hit that like button, share it with the channel. And if you want to see more content like this, all you have to do is subscribe. I'm the Mystical Green Beanie. Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time, adios nachos, adios.